Carnegie is very much into all of this. You have the Carnegie Institution funding the Cold Spring Arbor eugenics experiment early in the last century, around 1904. And I put this information in my books like Secret Records Reveal. And so Carnegie was very, very important. In 1963, Carnegie put up the money for the first governor's school, as it's called, in the nation. This is a school where you have your gifted and talented high school students attend. And the first one was in my state, and I was there in the first class. And since then, it's gone everywhere. It's in, Bill Clinton and Hillary modeled theirs in Arkansas after hours, and all 50 states now have these things. But anyway, Carnegie funded that, and the test that they used seemed rather strange to me. I've mentioned this before, so I'm not going to go back into it to any great extent. But the test, a lot of them came from the Psychological Corporation, which was formed around 1920-21. And what their mission was is they wanted to identify people in general who might be useful as public policy people if placed in particular positions, whether in government or academia, whatever, but primarily in government, so somewhere they could make a difference. And the correspondence between the Psychological Corporation and the person who tested us, gave us all these tests, said they wanted to keep a file on us. They wanted to keep a file on us. So they were going to collect data, and they gave us all of these tests, and a lot of them were values probing. And I've mentioned this, and I've got a column, newswithviews.com, in which I go into this sort of information. And they would ask. They would give us like the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, which has about 771 questions about do you believe in God and so on. Now, once a person answers all that, 771 questions, you can find out a lot about a person, their temperament, their likes, dislikes, what particular pet peeves they have, and so on. So that's really a way of getting a psychological profile on an individual. You give them all this battery of tests, and, you put them all together, and you pretty well know what this individual, this youngster, usually in high school, college, is capable of doing or wants to do or doesn't want to do. And on that basis, you can pretty well choose who you want to suggest might run for public office and, move them on up the ladder and favorably publicize them and so on. And so that's what the clarification on President Obama. Yes, he is a puppet, as the others have been, most of the others, but it's really not necessary to have somebody actually sitting in some, off of the West Wing in the White House, waiting to tell President Obama his next move at 11:30 a.m. or something.
Well, of course, I'm sure you're well aware. Susan Rice is there. Susan Rice, Rhodes Scholar, suddenly as a member of the Trilateral Commission, a former ambassador to the United Nations, appointed in 2008. Now she's, I don't know what her official position, but she's with Obama every single day. This woman from the Trilateral Commission, part and parcel of this whole movement created by Cecil Rhodes. So basically, I'm sure she keeps a pretty close eye on what Obama does. And I really think that if Barack Obama tried to do what he thought was right, they'd send him on a trip to Dallas. They do not allow certainly people in key positions in government to think and act independently. President Kennedy tried, and, well, we know what happened to him. We'll be back in a moment. Dr. Cuddy, you go right ahead.
Right, and this isn't new. I mean, it goes back to Woodrow Wilson and Colonel House, and if you look at the personal letters of Colonel House, you can find it's almost like a diary that he's going through, and he's sending something back to Paul Warburg, saying that he's watching Wilton, and don't worry, I'll be sure that he moves forward with the Federal Reserve Act and 1913 and so on. So he's reporting back, and everything's okay. And so these people are around him and watching them and monitoring them and making various suggestions. And but the point is, once they put this scheme into place, it really was, as Cecil Rhodes said, not really necessary to have an actual conspiracy with constant monitoring, because they have a profile. They know what Barack Obama will or won't do in certain circumstances, and so that's why they facilitate his rise to power. And plus, they might have a little something on him somewhere, something he wish he hadn't done. And so what you have largely is a manipulation of our leaders, call them puppets if you want. You have the media telling you certain things and not telling you certain things. And then, of course, you have to lower the standards for everything. You lower educational standards. You lower the standards in art and music. Now you can just bang on a drum, and that's called music because the beat is all that matters, and the beat is an emotional response, which is, as I said, the Power Elite moved us about 50 or so years ago through the culture, through music and art and everything, from the cognitive domain, that's your thinking domain, your reading, writing, math, basics in school, to the affective domain, that's social relationships and feelings. Why? Because those are more easily conditioned or emotions manipulated. And so that's what they do to guide people in a particular direction, really almost unknown by the individual themselves. They think they're smart and doing what they're independently arriving at is the best decision for a particular act, but it's often already a foregone conclusion, and so that's why I call them sometimes puppets. And then the press, of course, has a role now of not just being reporting the news, but sort of editorializing, even within news articles, which is supposed to be objective. And then, as I said, just withholding information. So, for example, only recently did we learn that with this great effort to have equality in the military, including combat troops, about half of the general inductees who are female into the Marines could only do about 3 pull-ups, as they call them. 8 would be a perfect score, but about half of them could only do 3 pull-ups. And they were just going to sort of change that, as a requirement. We'll just drop it because, they would not make it, right? And so what's more important to them is this egalitarian ethic, regardless of whether the soldier can perform the functions necessary to do a good job. And so you have this conditioning of the public along those lines, and the public is kept very busy. I've been through that before, going here and going there.
Hold that thought, Dennis. We'll be back in a moment here. Well, this is Dr. Dan. Our guest, of course, is Dr. Dennis Cuddy. Dennis, go right ahead. Dennis is talking about how they're altering the very structure of our society, how they're lowering the standards in the military. Certainly the women who are Marines certainly cannot compete physically with the males. They're not able to do certainly pull-ups. Ordinarily, you should be able to do a number of pull-ups. They can't, most of them can't do, at least half of them can't even do 3 pull-ups. So what we do is we simply lower the standards. After all, we have to have an egalitarian military, and so we'll lower the physical standards and requirements for our military, because we wouldn't want to have certainly men a lot stronger than women, would we? We live in a world gone mad, ladies and gentlemen, and we're setting ourselves up for a terrible defeat in the coming war. Go right ahead, Dr. Cuddy.
Okay, and as I said, this all applies to all kinds of fields. The press withholds information. They put a particular slant. They don't challenge President Obama with his charge that it was Assad who used the chemical weapons and so forth and so on. And as I said, education is very, very important because that's where values are formed right from the earliest of ages. And that's why they wanted to lower from the first grade down to compulsory kindergarten, and then move kindergarten down to 4 years of age, and then move it down even further. And even a so-called conservative like Lamar Alexander, when he was U.S. Secretary of Education, said he wanted the youngsters in school beginning at 6:30 and down to almost just out of the cradle. So it's a plan that is well formulated for total control, and it goes back a long, long way. And that's where we'll pick up with my book, The Power Elite: Their History and Future. And we're in this particular chapter that's about the Illuminati. And the reason education is important is I had been talking about the Illuminati's influence in America and how George Washington had written a letter to a Reverend Snyder in 1798, assuring him that he did know, that Washington did know that the Illuminati was here. And I read some of the oath taken by this theistical society, which is virtually identical to the Bavarian Illuminati degree of the Minerval. They have various degrees, and this was the Minerval, M-I-N-E-R.
I don't think it's important for our listeners to understand there really are secret societies today. There have always been secret societies. I know when I lived in South Africa, the government there was controlled by a secret society. The Buddhabond, you've never heard of it, but everybody there understood what was going on. Here in America, of course, you're not allowed to know about the secret societies that control the media, they control the banking system, they control the military, suddenly control our educational system, suddenly, and control the government. You're not supposed to understand that they're really just small numbers of people who make mockery out of our electoral process, use electronic voting machines, all of which can and are rigged today, so that we go to the polls every 4 years to vote, and then they determine who is going to be elected by how they rig the voting machines. Why do we have to have electric voting machines? Oh, why? Because we have all those hanging chads on the, if we have regular voting, we need honest voting like electronic voting machines that can all be rigged and nobody talks about it. Go right ahead, Dr. Cuddy.
Yeah, and there's various ways of rigging these machines. You have the machine where you pull the lever and you go in there, the curtain, but they can just, with the flip of a switch, they can adjust that number, the total of how many voted for this candidate or that candidate by way of a computer. Another thing they can do is not only do that, but they can find out how you voted. It's supposed to be a secret ballot, originally called the Australian ballot because they had the first secret type of ballot that we know today. But if you look at some of these machines, what you do is you don't go behind a curtain in a booth. You go to this little area, and you have this little, cubby hole sort of thing with a little table, and you mark your ballot. Then you slide it into a counting machine, a sort of computer. And what they can do there is they know what number voter you are because they have cameras, supposedly to monitor whether everything's on the up and up. But that camera can see that you might be voter number 932, and then it's a simple for that machine. And so it's a simple matter as the cards are dropped into this pile at the bottom of the machine of later, after you've gone, retrieving card number 932. And so they can actually find out how you voted, in addition to just punching another button and changing the results. And so, as I said, education is very, very important to this. If you want to, change the society, have the whole society change, which is what the Illuminati wanted to do. One of the primary areas that you have to control is the schools. And according to Will Monroe's book, History of the Pestilentian Movement in the United States, that's 1907, the educational ideas of the Illuminati member Johann Pestalozzi. He had the code name Alfred. That was his code name. Began to be printed in journals and textbooks in the U.S. as early as 1806.
Hold that thought, Dennis. We'll be right back. Go right ahead, Dr. Cuddy. We're talking about Mr. Pestalozzi.
Pestalozzi, the end is L-O-Z-Z-I, and it's the Swiss. Switzerland borders Italy, and it's an Italian name, but it's Pestalozzi. It's pronounced like a T, L-O-T-Z-I, Pestalozzi, but it's actually two Z's. That's just the way the Italians pronounce that type of syllable. And his code name, all these Illuminati members all had code names, and his was Alfred. And his works began to be printed in the journals and textbooks in the U.S. as early as 1806 and began to be used in some of the school systems, especially in New England, because they were viewed favorably by the intelligentsia of Horace Mann's day. If you don't know who Horace Mann is, he was known as the father of American public education. John Dewey, who will come along later, is known as the father of progressive education. But Horace Mann was generally known as the father of American public education. This is in the first half of the 1800s. And in Lawrence Kremen's book, Cremin, his book titled Transformation of the School, that was published